Welcome. We are delighted to talk today with two academics and one practitioner about the question of wellness online and engaging, what it means, what works and what doesn't. My name is Terri Kurtzberg. I am faculty at the business school. I've been here for 23 years, I think. My two colleagues, Gibbs and Theresa Lant, are online. I'm waving to the screen, although I don't see that. And so our general plan here, and Shailja, am I saying your name right? Shailja. Shailja. Okay. Dixit is here as well. And so basically our outline for the run of show is we're going to let each of our panelists introduce their work and their ideas and what they're thinking about these days for a couple of minutes. And then I have some questions just to lob their way, and we're delighted to hear your experiences as well and your questions and see where it takes us. Jen, why don't we start with you? Do you want to give us an overview?
Sure, sounds good. All right, well, it's such a pleasure to be here, albeit remotely. But I thought I would focus my remarks on two things that are important to have in order to have wellness in remote work. Based on some of my current research. So one important thing is boundary management in terms of maintaining appropriate boundaries between our work and home lives. And the second important thing is balancing the needs and well-being of both teams and individuals. So I'm going to talk briefly about two recent studies on global knowledge workers that I've conducted who were, and in both cases, these workers were forced to go remote during the pandemic. And in both studies, we were fortunate enough to collect data during the transition to forced remote work. So in the first study, which is almost published, and one of my collaborators is also here, Maggie Boyraz, and we have several collaborators from Finland as well. So this was a diary study of 69 knowledge workers in 12 teams, and we started collecting diaries from them in March 2020. These teams were initially co-located and forced to become remote. And the teams engaged in increased team interactions online to cope with the social isolation that members were facing. And in the process, we discovered what we called a multi-level well-being paradox that emerged in that the needs of teams or team well-being were sometimes in conflict with the needs of individuals or individual well-being. Sometimes individuals would put the needs of the team ahead of their own needs by spending even more time in front of their computer, participating in lunch breaks with their colleagues and virtual coffee breaks. And this came at the cost of their own well-being through creating Zoom fatigue and burnout. And other times individuals would opt out of these virtual coffee breaks and online socializing to protect their own well-being, but it ended up hurting the team. And we found that overall successful or balanced teams engaged in reflection as a team to make sure that they were discussing the stressors that different team members were facing, appraising them, and coming up with coping actions that would match or align with the specific stressor. So they would do things like have short daily check-ins as a team to discuss how team members were doing, maybe get away from the computer, take short walks during the day, or create connectivity rules. In the second study, which was just published in the Journal of Computer-Mediated Communication, this was an interview study of 55 global workers in 9 global teams in a large Nordic company that was headquartered in Finland. And we examined their boundary management practices, both to manage global work boundaries in terms of time and space, and also to manage their work-home boundaries, which proved even more challenging. So before the pandemic, this company had very strong work-life balance and rigid boundaries between work and home, to the point that workers rarely took work home with them or communicated with colleagues after hours, evenings, weekends, vacations. It was to the point that they would rarely even email somebody in a different time zone if it was after their work hours. But this all changed when they were forced to adopt work from home practices during the pandemic. And this led to boundary collapse that was very hard for them to adjust to because they were used to having this rigid work-life separation. But we did find that they adopted some boundary collapse strategies, including connecting for well-being, where they would choose to connect after hours to give themselves more flexibility so that they could, for example, attend to childcare responsibilities during the day and then voluntarily connect after hours to get their work done. And one interesting thing that our findings revealed was the sort of unanticipated important role of the office. So the office was not really needed for doing their work, which they could do from home as global workers, but it was really important in preserving work-life separation and helping them manage work-home boundaries. So this brings up questions of, the role of the office in the future. So even though these studies didn't examine gender per se, the findings, I think, are highly applicable to women in remote work. Boundary work practices have been found to be highly gendered. For example, mothers shouldered most of the burden of increased childcare while working from home during the pandemic. And also, we know that women and other marginalized groups have been the most vulnerable to the challenges of remote work, with many women and mothers dropping out of the workforce during the pandemic to manage childcare responsibilities at home. But I'm also hopeful that there will be some unanticipated benefits for women that come out of this. However, so one example in California, there's been a significant increase this year in the number of men and fathers who took parental leave. About 20% more men took paid family leave this year than pre-pandemic, and 44% of claims were for men. Also, remote work makes home parenting demands more visible. And this has normalized the fact that all workers, not just women, have personal lives outside of work, since we've been seeing them in people's Zoom backgrounds for the past few years. And this has also normalized parenthood, which previously was something that especially women had to keep invisible. There's this concept of invisible parenting where women, don't have any traces of being a mother or a parent in the workplace. So hopefully that will change that and will result in changing workplace norms to become more flexible and accommodating of our lives outside of work. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Theresa, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a hard act to follow, but I'll do my best here. Hi, everyone. I'm Theresa Lant, currently at Pace University in New York. And what I've been doing for the last, well, I lost count. I get too old. I lose count. 15 years or so is working in the area of what's called team science. So fairly, sizable teams that cross boundaries of knowledge, practice, and also geography. So the one of the things that I think the pandemic and the move to more, hybrid work, even among scientists, engineers, particularly in academia, has, highlighted some unique challenges of sort of this hybrid collaboration when you're dealing with dispersed knowledge-intensive work. And I know that a lot of the, quite a bit of the research in global teams is working with knowledge workers and so on. But I'm going to argue that the design of research jobs, especially in academia, is quite a bit different from many other types of work. There's already extensive autonomy in how, when, with whom work is done. So it can tend to be somewhat, you have to create your own structure already. And one of the most important goals of this scholarly academic knowledge work is knowledge creation and innovation, which is facilitated by collaboration across knowledge boundaries, right? You need different types of ideas coming from different disciplines, different, theories in use to sort of spark that, creativity there where you move a field forward. And the area of team science has seen an increase in the teams get larger and this includes science, engineering, medicine, usually always has some sort of academic component because many of these teams are funded by either the National Institutes of Health or the National Science Foundation. And they're being increasingly required to collaborate across institutional and geographic boundaries, as well as their disciplinary boundaries. So what's interesting is that such collaboration there necessitates remote engagement with your collaborators because you're not at the same institution. And what was interesting following many of these teams during the pandemic was the impact of different so parts of teams would be co-located and at different times they were able to actually meet in person, while other parts of the team have only worked remotely with each other. So some of them haven't even have ever met in person that's not mediated through Zoom, for instance. So my thoughts today are based on conversations with several of these individuals. And so at this point, it's just anecdotal, not scientific, but I think it highlights several of the unique challenges in this type of, again, team science work. On the plus side, I mean, obviously there's the individual flexibility. I'm sure we're all very aware of this. And this is the, I mean, it's a benefit, even though in our sort of scholarly work, we do have a great deal of flexibility. The ability to, this has added another layer. So for instance, Jen and I were just chatting before we came into the webinar that, we are able to participate in this wonderful event because we have the, Zoom capability. Because we were both in Fridays are faculty meetings, right? And so we had faculty meetings. I'm jumping right from here to interviewing job candidates. And I wouldn't be able to do that, right? I would have had to have chosen, am I going to be meeting with job candidates? Am I going to a faculty meeting, or am I going to, engage with my colleagues through this conference? So that's, so the technology has really facilitated this broader, more inclusive collaboration. So it has increased the participants across university boundaries and has enabled individuals to participate in these science teams who might not otherwise be able to for a variety of reasons. It could be because they are in universities or states that don't, they don't have the funding for travel. Okay. It can be for individuals for whom travel is just difficult due to either family responsibilities or disability. And so that has been a real plus. You have the decreased burden of travel, and also, of course, the expense of travel. And just on a little bit of a side note, because I've been working with scientists and engineers who are working on sort of the work of the future, the factory of the future, and with robotics and what have you, what became very, I think the ability to work remotely has also spurred their own creative thinking as they consider, how do we make the factory of the future more inclusive, right? How do you enable those who are maybe perhaps physically disabled, can't, actually have a, work machinery in a manufacturing environment, but they could, interface with a robot, computer interface and
so all sorts of creative ideas that way. Okay, so those are the pros. The cons, I think really, well, there's two. One is obvious, I think, in that is many scientists, engineers, a lot of also medical type of research requires working in a lab with equipment. Okay. So if you don't have, you might be able to collaborate with someone at, a university across the country, what have you, on some really interesting ideas. And maybe you are in, let's say a university that doesn't have the budget for this type of equipment or for travel. So it's great that these scientists and engineers can collaborate. However, because they don't have access to the equipment that is really required. So that is a bit of a, it's again, everything is a double-edged sword. So it's, so I don't think those collaborative relationships, if there is, lab work where people need to be sort of co-creating their innovations, that's not going to work exclusively remotely. Okay, I think there will need to be some face-to-face. And that leads me to really my last point about the downside of sort of remote or hybrid knowledge work that is designed to lead to innovation. And that is that what we know about creativity and innovation is that it benefits from face-to-face, scheduled and especially unscheduled interactions. So whether it's the random encounters, over lunch or coffee or just down the hallway, where you get an idea and you run it by someone else, and these sort of semi-random encounters of ideas, that it's much more difficult for those to happen when you just have scheduled Zoom calls. And we know from a lot of research on innovation that this sort of, whether you call it accidental or random, serendipitous, collisions of knowledge and ideas are essential to the innovation process. So I'm not coming up with any recommendations other than trying to, highlight the particular, some similar, but some unique challenges of science, engineering, types of knowledge work.
Thank you. So one of the things that I found in common, which I'll use to kick it over, Shailja, for your impressions, is that really both of you are talking about context, right? So Jen is saying, sure, we have these individual needs, but you also need to pay attention to the team level. And what does the team need? And how does that context support or work against what the individual needs? And Theresa is saying, well, we have also these, different job types and different norms, and thinking about, and even the boundary things that Jen mentioned, your family has to be supportive, right? It's not just a question of, can I manage my own boundaries? But back to the gender question, do the kids respect when dad is working, but say, oh, mom's here, I have a question, right? Those we need support at every single level. So I'm curious to hear your experiences. How does the context help support remote work in your place of business?
So, we are actually a women's health company with digital first approach. That's what we do. And our work focuses on mental health for women. The company was born out of the need that women don't, due to stigma and many things, they don't talk much about their mental health across their life cycle. There's less diagnosis that happens for women with mental health condition. About like 65% of the women who need some level of support don't get any support, right? 1 in 5 women do have more mental health related issue than men, twice more likely than men. So multiple reasons. That's why. So the essence of our whole company is actually based on online or digital first rather mental health support.
So you are the context. This is perfect.
Yes. So it was born to support women who are not able to get to the care, but rather bringing the care to them in a virtual environment, right? So, incidentally, although it just kind of happened, so it was not meant to be this way, we started our company right before pandemic, where we have seen more cases of mental health, more need for women to get some kind of help. Again, 75% of the women don't get any kind of help. 65% of our counties in US don't have the right kind of trained therapist who can deliver that help. For women, there are multiple things. One is their natural body chemistry or hormones, right? In every stage that predispose them more to mental health issue, be it adolescent, pregnancy, postpartum depression, anxiety, perimenopause, menopause, a big area that we are studying these days. On top of that, workplace does not help them either. There are more external factors. So we call it like a wheel, actually, internal factors and external factors that get women get exposed to. So in our workplace, it's, a mental health and virtual. We definitely promote that within the team to do it. I have team in India, so we are also across the continent working on this fairly big area, we believe, where there's a high unmet need. And so a lot of our work is virtual. One of the things that we have found out, actually my India team is completely virtual. US team, we do meet on an ongoing basis. What we find out, I'll give an example of our studies. We have conducted 6 randomized control trials on women to see how exactly they respond to online tools for wellness and especially mental and emotional health. We found out that 30% more women acknowledge that they do have a mental health issue. And we describe it actually behavioral health, so that it's not depression or psychosis in extreme, but rather anxiety and stress is also in the same paradigm. So 30% more women acknowledge that they have an issue and they need help, versus when they are in front of their physician or even expressing to their own spouse. In our platforms or tool, which are all online, most of the logins happen at 12 to 1 in the morning. And you can just imagine, like, if there is a new mom, baby is not sleeping, perimenopause, menopause, we have sleep issues that's proven and documented. So probably they have insomnia, they're not able to sleep because of, mood swings, hot flushes, variety of things. And we see and at that time, you don't have anyone to talk to, or any physician or any mental health available. So that's our whole company is based on that context. What I have seen in our team, actually, we tell them that there are one thing which I mandate and kind of tell people to do as much as possible. Even if you are on Zoom, you need to have camera on. And that actually forces you to at least have a work-like environment, and you're just not sitting in your casual, relaxed, complete, like you're not alert enough. So that, I think, is one thing that has helped. Another thing is that allows people to, relate to you more versus just being like off camera. Although there are people in my team who are in India, and so time zone wise, it can be 10 p.m. in the night. But we tell them that as much as possible, be on a camera. That has helped. It has also helped to build team interaction that way. Another thing we tell them is that not necessarily every meeting has to start with the agenda. Like, so that has helped a lot. So 10, 15 minutes, make sure that you are actually talking about, like, hey, like you would do in a hallway or by coffee machine, right? How's it going? Like, did your kid is applying, my son is applying to the college. So my son is actually Lisa's, son's classmate. So, are you applying, to the college? What's going on and how things are going? So use it like a conversational platform as well. Zoom should not be just used for only work, and then you have 3 things in agenda and you talk and, you take notes and then done. If you're remote, because that's nature of work and we are going to be remote. I mean, in our case, we cannot avoid it. We are cross-continent. We are a company which is online wellness company, so we just cannot avoid it. Just make sure that you're using this tool in the right way. I have to point out this thing, actually, a few days back, there was a research that was published that impact of Zoom actually on mental health growth, right? It talked about like those people who are, if you have more and more Zoom, it has impact on early onset of dementia and other neurodegenerative disorders. To be looked at, I haven't studied like how big the sample size and what was the longevity of follow-up and whatnot, but something for all of us to reflect on. I think we are, as a society, are more siloed and loneliness is a thing. So people do need, we encourage our team to try to meet. So my India team, I tell them to meet for lunch and dinner, even if all of the meetings are happening on Zoom. Similarly, in US, we try to at least meet once a week in person as well. So I think, you need to create a hybrid atmosphere where you can have some kind of interaction. Also, Zoom should not be associated with, oh, this is just a work thing. Zoom can be associated with, okay, Friday is our time when we just chat. There is no agenda, and that can be, online technology can be used for that.
Thank you. It's very interesting. We've hit a couple of different pieces of what the technology can serve for the person, for the human behind it, right? So some of my own research looks at what happens when we change devices. It turns out people are more likely to act unethically when using a laptop than a cell phone, things like that. We assume the technology is all the same, and all of these studies that are starting to come out about Zoom, I haven't seen the one you're mentioning, but I have seen quite a few that talk about why is Zoom so much more exhausting than a face-to-face meeting. You go to a whole day of meetings, and sure, you're tired at the end, but it's not the same, right? This kind of back-to-back-to-back Zoom. And, there's a whole list of sort of cognitive psychological reasons that people are looking into about what is it about this tool. And it's a curious idea. Is it also because we're bundling it too closely with serious work, right?
Yeah.
That if we do use it more and we do have those kind of breakpoints in between and more of the personal touch connection, maybe that's a way to, support having this environment work. And also remember, it's I tell my students this all the time, whether or not you're meeting, even just over email or electronically, or you're shaking someone's hand, there's always a person behind this. You are a person and they are a person, and that's actually important. And, I teach negotiation. So we talk about how critical it is to really make these kinds of connections and make that happen.
Yeah, last during pandemic, in one of the years, I'm forgetting it was 21 or 22, we actually used Zoom for our wine tasting within company.
Did we send everyone the wine?
Yeah,
You did.
so we sent out some wine samples and we told everyone to be online with Zoom, and we celebrated our holiday party like completely virtual. So I think to your point, if you start using technology and not, I think, associate with only a work and a very serious thing that you have to do, it starts making it more light and meaningful,
One of the other things that's come up in some areas of research, and I'm curious about each of your impressions on this, is how important it is for leadership to reach out and make the connections with their employees, right? That seems to be such a critical piece of the experience of any given employee, is what kind of connection they have, and maybe not even with their boss, but senior leadership. Is there really a sense of belonging based on that? But it can be tough for someone at a lower level to make that happen themselves. So we can say the right answer is to fix the leaders, and sure, that's good. But I'm curious if any of you have thoughts about what can any one individual do to help move this along, to help craft an experience that we know would be better by having better connections to the other individuals around them at work, including people much more senior to them. Jen, can I ask you to start on that one?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that this is a really important issue. And one of the things that I noticed in studying teams during, that were working remotely during the pandemic is that I think a lot of people were still able to get their work done. They, developed strong bonds with their teammates, their team members, but their communication became a lot more atomized, and they were pretty much like only interacting with their teams. And when you think about when we go into the office, we have all of these other informal interactions with people, with other employees that we don't directly work with, top management, higher level management. And that I think has been a big, cost of working remotely, is like we just focus more on our tasks and maybe our immediate, coworkers. But I think, like you said, it's really important for employees to have to feel a connection with leadership, to feel a sense of identification with the organization more broadly, to feel like they're part of, the organizational culture. So as far as what leadership can do, I mean, I think that, that's important to think about when we're structuring remote work, and making sure there are still opportunities for employees to come into the office or to have events, that are company wide, where they can interact more broadly and feel, this sense of connection with management. And just a really quick, example, I published a study with Julia Eisenberg a few years on this Russian telecommunications company that implemented an enterprise social media tool, and they forced all their employees to use it, and their employees were really young, like 20 somethings, they were not working remote, they were in the office, but they were like spread out all over Russia in 9 different time zones. And they felt very physically isolated, like in their little kiosks in the mall, or, it was like picture like Verizon kiosks or something. So the top managers were really active in this tool, and it was the first time the lower level employees could directly like ask questions and get answers from them. And it worked really well. And it really helped them feel more connected. And the key was that the management, top and middle management were active users in the tool. They weren't just kind of saying, okay, you guys use it. So I think that there are ways that technology can help with that, but I think also a lot of it should be done in person too.
Theresa, do you have thoughts?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that has been mentioned to me in the context of, again, an academic environment is the mentorship. So you have everything from undergrads to graduates to postdocs to junior faculty to senior, primary principal investigators, and they're working on a team, right? They're a member of a lab or what have you. And what several people have mentioned is during the pandemic, we sort of lost that individual mentoring connection that it really sort of created a thread through all of these different levels of status, I guess, and accomplishment. Whereas when they have the opportunities to physically be working, they're working with a robot or they're working with a piece of equipment, together, they're doing something physical and intellectual at the same time, and seeing what happens. There's something about the breaking down of the the barriers between those status levels, and it makes it a more, I think, meaningful mentoring relationship. Whereas trying to do the mentoring via a virtual interface, you don't get the same level of comfort, I think. So anyway, that's one thing that's been raised to me. So
That's the whole like $1 billion industry of team building offsite things, right? You go and you do something together, you create something, and we're kind of artificially creating the chance to build a robot, which, those teams are fortunate enough to have it all in one package. They have something actually meaningfully engaging to do, but they also get the benefit of all that togetherness. Question.
Yeah, I had a question. I wanted to get the panel's thoughts on Gen Z, because I think that they have been adversely impacted, right? They probably, went to college in the years of the pandemic, starting work more remotely, and that's a population that needs more of that social interaction, right? They're probably single, they're looking for friends at work, looking for more mentorship in the office. So how do we deal sort of with the impact of remote work on Gen Z?
In case that didn't come through, the question is about Gen Z in particular and their need to make connections that maybe they haven't, but they did lose a chunk of their upbringing, right?
Yeah, I can, I talk to the younger teammates, all the time, my team. It's a big problem. And if you reflect back on how we were able to be where we are today, right? I attribute a lot to my going to office and finding mentor and hallway discussion, and learning from people around you, cross-pollination. I'm a physician by training. I had engineers in my team and I was like, what is an aeronautic engineer doing in my team? And I learned so much. So I think all of those aspects are lost for Gen Z, and it's a huge problem. I tell them that I am quite worried, that you guys need to have a mentor and seek mentors. For me, it was very natural that I'm in office, I found this person and I'm inspired by this particular person, and I can just say, hey, would you like to have a cup of coffee with me? And I wanted to just understand what you're like, how you got to where you are and your leadership position and so on. But Gen Z, it's a huge problem, right? I mean, they don't get, networking is a huge issue, and networking does play a big role. Mentorship does play a big role in your growth as a person, in your career and whatnot. So there are ways, I think there are forums that are getting created, affiliate yourself with a group or something. It could be anything, you can find some nonprofit that you work with. So I think Gen Z has to seek more of these groups outside their work. I don't think so when I had to do that, because we naturally find some of the groups, like group of people that you start going to lunch during your lunch hours or meet for coffee or when, and things like that. But Gen Z has to now make an effort to do that. Gen Z also has to make an effort. We were talking about mentorship, to seek, be more proactive to find that mentorship. So it is, I think we'll have to figure out more vehicle for Gen Z to do that. One thing I started doing, first I did like an office hour kind of thing in remote office hours. So I'll just block, I'll do my own work, but keep my office hours sort of open. So if somebody wants to enter that virtual room, I'll talk to them. Then I found out that not many people are coming. I have like some 20, 25-year-olds in my company, right? So probably they are like, this is their first job. And they were like, I don't know. I mean, think about it, when you have to do a hallway conversation with your boss's boss, 2-3 level up. It's okay. It's just a hello, how are you? Oh yeah, the football game was very good. And that's it, you're gone. I asked them that why nobody comes to this virtual your office hour. I made this so to talk to you. I said, now we are about it. Like, what are we going to talk for 20 minutes? Like, it's a big deal. Like, so they have to figure now. I said, oh yeah, I understand. Struggle is for real. Like, 20 minutes. What are you going to talk to me? And it's a big deal versus if you are just in a hallway or you are stuck in an elevator and you just have to say hello or 5-10 minutes, and that's a whole different thing. So what I started doing was virtual actually roundtables. So now they have a group. So there are 2-3 people. It's not so much that the burden to talk and engage is just on me. Like, there are 3-4 of them and they can talk. That has helped. And then I think we started pairing them a little bit more with a buddy kind of system that helped a little bit as well. So they have their buddy and we rotate their buddies all across, and that has helped. But to your point, Gen Z I think needs to make more effort to figure out their affiliation, not just in office because their work is more virtual, and to find out other associations and groups that they can associate.
I was concerned about your comment about the dementia and the impact. Is that just because of the isolation aspect and it doesn't like parts of your brain?
This study I just saw, I have to be honest, I have not looked at the construct of the study itself and what were the endpoints that was studied, how big it was.
Yeah.
But there's a growing body of literature that I just started looking at that talks about online. Yeah, could be, I think, I look at this loneliness and what's going on because we are a mental health company. So that could be it. If you have you seen the documentary on blue zones?
Oh, I mean, I'm aware of it, right?
So
So
the blues 100 plus,
Social
right?
is huge,
So
right.
one of the things they talk about food, this and the one pillar of that is actually loneliness and community, right? So the people who are healthier and above 100 years in those blue zones across world, they do have a community, and that's one of the big reasons for that. So yes, that could be one of the things that we have more loneliness when you're all virtual online, but that's why why I think it's really important for this next generation to find out some groups outside. It could be a workout group, it could be a non-profit group, go for a biking group or something. And frankly speaking, that's what I tell my son, that you have to affiliate yourself with something beyond just, what you do.
Cause it triggers all sorts of different things, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to interact so differently at that level. Like you said, they're afraid to come in and talk to you because they don't know what to say for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But if it was about work,
more
it'd
than
be no
5 minutes,
problem.
right? 5-minute coffee haul is okay,
Yeah.
imagine like when I used to get
Yeah,
bumped into boss's boss, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm in some C
oh,
level,
yeah,
and I just have to talk for 5 minutes. There could be anything, weather,
yeah.
game, and then I'm gone, like, oh my God, let me just move on. Now it's like 20 minutes. What am I going to say for 20 minutes? It's a big deal, right? So I would just sit there and nobody would say that something is wrong. They don't like me, or what's going on here.
I came up with a different solution for my students who didn't come to office hours ever. I told them, sign up for a 15-minute meet and greet and I'll interview you. I'll ask you a bunch of just for fun questions about yourself, and then they sign up in droves. They're perfectly happy if there's some structure, if the burden's not on
somebody
them to
else
talk,
is happy.
right?
Yeah.
So it's both ways, right? Gen Z needs to figure out how to connect, but also the rest of the world needs to figure out how to make it comfortable for them to connect as well. We are out of time. Thank you so much to our panelists and
Thank you.
our audience. This was a lovely conversation.